To welcome Evan Cantor to the stage. He is perhaps one of the wittiest people I know, and apparently a comic book aficionado. So.
Okay, it's doing a thing. Beautiful. All right, hi guys. My name is Evan Cantor, and I have an undergraduate degree in psychology. Then I went to law school and became a lawyer, and now here I am, NMSIH. So of course I came today to talk to you about comic books. All right. So why would I possibly want to do that? First of all, I just think comic books are neat. But besides that, comic books are kind of a cheaply and quickly made medium. And that doesn't mean that they were a bad thing or a bad form of entertainment. When you look at comic books, what you really get is a sense of whatever was in the character's mind, the creator's mind at the time. They didn't put a whole lot of thought into whatever they were writing down. They're like, oh, okay, a hero would probably do this here. Okay, done. I have to do a lot more of this today. So as a result, you get a very different sort of take than you would in any sort of art that people intended to last forever. Why am I talking about origins? Well, the origin is really the only story that the creator of the comic is stuck with. The origin is, what defines the hero. It explains why they have their powers, and basically, you learn the origin. You know most about what you're going to expect of the hero. And finally, why am I talking about comic books? Well, comic books are an ideal hobby for the unathletic youth. Certainly, growing up in New York, I was one of those. So what are we going to do right now? We're going to go through the history of comic books and the evolution of the idea of a hero. And I'm going to talk at you for a couple minutes, so let's get started. All right, we're going to start in the 1930s and 40s, and that's when comic books were basically first invented, were first used. So what was going on at the time? We had the beginning of the idea of the costumed crime-fighting superhero. And also at that time, World War II was going on, and so we see both of those things intertwining in our first heroes. We had people like Shazam or Captain Marvel. They changed the name for legal reasons at one point. He was literally, much like his readership, a little boy named Billy Batson who runs into a wizard one day. And that wizard tells him his magical name, and when he says it, he says the word Shazam, he's hit with a bolt of lightning. I'm talking about the boy, not the wizard. And the boy is turned into a costumed hero. So mighty, he could throw people, and he could bend a tank, or whatever that is, into a knot, regardless of what the scale of the art looked like. Speaking of the World War II aspect of it, he's clearly fighting on the other front there. And there's another hero that was very much tied into the World War. This guy right here. Yes, there he is. He was a 98-pound weakling. He was 4F. He was rejected from the armed forces. So he volunteered for a secret experiment by Dr. Reinstein with an R, because Einstein is a physicist. So he takes a super soldier serum, and it indeed makes him a super soldier. And he uses his super soldier powers. This is the first issue of Captain America right here, to punch Hitler right in the face. All right, we're going to move on into the 60s now. In the 1960s, I'm going to talk about the faith that people had in science at the time. This was the decade when we sent someone to the moon. And it was also when, between cancer therapies and antibiotics, we were going to get rid of most disease. Things were going very well. But people were also pretty scared of the ideas of science and what that might mean. And a great example of that are these guys. A brilliant scientist named Reed Richards starts building an experimental rocket, and he's so excited about using it, and maybe he's losing the funding, that he decides he's going to steal that rocket, and he's going to go up into space without waiting for the radiation shielding to be installed. And as a result, he and all of his crew, which included his later wife and her brother and so on, are soaked with cosmic radiation, and they turn into the superheroes, the Fantastic Four, and one of them becomes a giant orange rock man, but that's okay. Going on, as we hit the 1970s, we start to see a change in the way that heroes are depicted. We have a more individualistic type of hero, and less of a shining example of heroism, mainly. And a great example of that, if that works, there you go, is Luke Cage. Luke Cage was a man who went to prison for a crime he did not commit, and volunteered-ish for an experiment in order to get parole. The experiment, by the way, experiments are a leading cause of superheroism. That particular experiment gave him super strength and invulnerability. I think we can all agree his real contribution to superhero-dom is his amazing costume, including a chain belt and a man tiara. In the 70s, they were trying to appeal to the blaxploitation idea, but eventually the market being what it was, he was paired with a kung fu fighting white man. Right. As we move on into the 80s, the idea of the hero was changing again, and we sort of were getting the anti-hero. An example of that is this guy. His name is not the Justicer, his name is the Punisher. He's going to be punitive. He was a man, his origin was that he witnessed his family's murder at the hands of the mafia. And just decided to go around killing criminals. That was basically it. He didn't have a power, he just owned a lot of guns, he looks pretty creepy there. And he was originally a villain who fought Spider-Man, but apparently in the 80s that was what was popular. As we move on to the 90s, we continue with the anti-hero idea, and also people that basically didn't really have an origin. Guys like this guy, Cable. If you look at him closely, he's the guy with the large gun. If you look at him closely, he is part metal, and he was a time traveler from the future, but I want to stress this, he was not anything like the Terminator, even though that's exactly the same story. He really didn't get an origin, he was just sort of thrown in there because the art looked cool, and that's really what the 90s were about for comic books, things that look kind of cool to kids. His only superpower was telekinesis, and that was really just used to explain how he could hold such large guns. Okay. So we've seen, we started with sort of bright and shining example of a hero, and then we move on to a sort of anti-hero concept, and then that changes again as we hit 2000, and specifically as we hit 9/11. So it was very difficult for comic books to deal with that idea because they were telling stories of fantastic heroes, and then there was a situation where we really could have used that sort of hero, but we had first responders, and things went pretty well eventually, but it was a strange time for comic books. How do you tell stories after an event like that? So eventually what happened was you had things like this. This character here is from a book called Ex Machina. He was a superhero called the Great Machine, and he gained his powers when a meteorite fell to the ground and gave him the power to control machines. He also had a neat jetpack. You can see that up there. However, he uses that jetpack in the past in the comic book to help when the towers are hit, and he saves one of the towers. He then runs for mayor, and the comic book is about his time as the superhero mayor of New York City. He was literally a superpowered Rudy Giuliani. More recently, in comic books, around, I think it was still in 2011, Batman has actually incorporated. He's now opened a franchise. He's gone public with this identity, and he's going to open up a Batman, a Batman franchise in every country. And why am I talking about this? Well, we have the French Batman here. His name is Night Runner. His only superpower is that of parkour, which is French freestyle walking. It's not a great power, but that's okay. Why is he significant? Well, Night Runner is also a practicing Muslim. He's of Arab descent, and he is a hero that is there. He's fighting extremism and terror, and he's also fighting crime. But there's still been an uproar in blogs because people get bored on blogs. So where are we now? Okay, so we've kind of gone over a history of the costumed hero and how that idea has changed. When I started talking about this, what seems like only minutes ago, I presented the idea that the origin is the only story that the creators are stuck with. The good part is, when we tell our own origin stories, we're not stuck with that. We're free to define our origin and our ultimate goal any way we want. For example, our origin can lead to something even better than hanging out on rooftops and occasionally jumping on a criminal. So I'm going to give you an example of that right now. So one of the conflicts you hear about a lot with my current generation is the idea of emerging adulthood, and that 30 is the new 20, and that people are going to school for a really long time because there's not a lot of jobs available, and they're not sure what to do. So you can look at that as a bad thing or as a waste of money, or maybe you can sublimate it in the following way. Lost in the depths of a career that he did not enjoy and felt like was making the world a worse place. Then left adrift in the pipeline of science re-education. traveled to an exotic land in order to learn the secrets of the human body. I hope to be / I am. I'm sorry about that. Dr.